You enjoy your life in your human form, playing guitar and going shopping. But you dread every full moon. You're tired of the sudden hair growth, bloodthirsty urges, and the rage of the townsfolk. You just want to make it through a full month as a normal human. Well, now you can, with Lycanthropol. Lycanthropol is a once-daily, Van Helsing-approved treatment that can reduce or eliminate full moon flare-ups. When taken in conjunction with prayer and a high-garlic diet, Lycanthropol has proven to completely stop full moon transformations in over 16% of cases. Lycanthropol is not for everyone. Don't take Lycanthropol if you're employed by the circus, on a basketball team, or nursing a wolf cub. Side effects may include headaches, diarrhea, vomiting, death, and eternal damnation. Imagine going vegan and scootering in the moonlight. Living a normal human life is possible with Lycanthropol. Contact your local charlatan today and ask if Lycanthropol is right for you.
Iha Hauna Hana Guiv, everyone, which is my attempt to wish you a happy Halloween in Irish Gaelic. Good evening to you all and welcome to Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter. My name is Brian P. Easton and I am the author of the autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter series. And behind me is the Werewolf Bar, where for the last 5 years we have discussed my book series. We have discussed the occult, weaponry, monster hunting in general, movies, books, just about anything that has to do with monsters or the hunting of monsters. And we're glad that you could join us tonight for what is our 2024 Halloween edition. We've got a great show for you, but first let me give you some updates on what we've got going on this fall. As you know, the audiobook for Winter Fox Journal's Book 2 is ready for you to download. And since the last time we met, Basil Sands has started work on the audiobook for the first volume of the Legends of the Werewolf Hunter series. Legends of the Werewolf Hunter anthology. As you know, Basil Sands does all the narration for our projects. So we've got that going for us, which is nice. Also, since last we met, we have put together the 4th issue of Monster Hunter Quarterly. And we have rolled it with our 3 existing issues into an omnibus, which is available for download and purchase as a hard copy edition, the way it was originally intended. Monster Hunter Quarterly is a collaboration between Miles Booth from MB Press and myself, and it is imagined as an old periodical or magazine that ran from 1890 to the first part of 1990 as an organ of record specifically for monster hunters. Each issue comes with its own original articles and classically designed advertisements, or advertisements as they called them back then, presented in a vintage magazine format and style. And I think you're going to get a kick out of it. In addition to these publications, which are really peripheral to the book series, we've also recently created a pictorial volume for your viewing pleasure, which visualizes many of the characters and incidents from the autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter series, as well as the Winter Fox Journals. So if you've ever been interested in or curious about how some of the characters and scenes might appear outside of the text, you'll want to check out a Werewolf Hunter pictorial. And while you're at it, you can check out another one that we did, which is kind of a more whimsical glimpse of the Werewolf Bar as a 1930s speakeasy or nightclub catering specifically to werewolves. And you'll find the links to all of these works and of course the original trilogy and the prequels in the description down below. It doesn't take mental gymnastics to know that this is our favorite season. Not only because it's Halloween, but because the weather is cooler, the days are shorter, and headed into an altogether darker time of the year. Nowadays, folks like to call it spooky season, which is appropriate, of course, especially since it seems to start a little bit earlier every year, especially where Madison Avenue is concerned. I mean, Halloween decorations are showing up in hobby stores and big box stores mid-August in some cases. And I think that's because they realize more and more the amount of bank there is to be made on the back of Halloween. Now, this has always been the case, right? I mean, at least within our lifetimes. And although the stores do bust out their Halloween merch, it seems, earlier and earlier, it's nothing new for products and pitchmen to turn their advertising dollars towards ghoulies, ghosties, and long-legged beasties. So with that in mind, we put together a collection of television commercials specifically designed for Halloween. Now, you're going to see in these commercials, and they're mostly older, you're going to see them hawking everything from candy to cars, but with one theme in mind, and that is werewolves. So take a look now at some Halloween-themed commercials from the ghost of Halloween's past.
Only the rich, meaty sauce of Chef Boyardee can tame the beast in you.
The Coke, the cherry, the vanilla. Such a perfect combination. Almost too delicious to be true. This credit card bill.
High interest charges, growing balance.
You could save up to $500 a year with the nation's lowest fixed rates. Switch to the Capital One No Hassle card with a low fixed 4.99 APR.
What's it you want?
Deep down inside every chocolate lover's soul is a beastie. A beastie that hungers for the ultimate chocolate extravaganza. Hershey's Bar None. Chocolate wafers, chocolate cream, peanuts, and pure milk chocolate make Bar None the only one that will tame the chocolate beastie.
It's just so beautiful. Hey, let's open the moonroof.
I guess I have some explaining to do.
What? Why does he get fangs?
Yeah, I guess I have some explaining to do too.
Your teeth.
Why, you like them?
Yeah.
Why, thank you.
Isn't it wonderful what a great smile can do? See your Michigan Dental Association dentist and smile on.
Thank you guys for both coming in. It's such short notice. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
So we had art today. Caitlin drew this.
Oh, wow, this is great. I love the little sticky things.
Oh, no, I put those there. Just to cover the...
Oh, wow. That's some rough language there.
Some of the combinations are...
Yeah. Really? We don't talk like this at home.
It's called Daddy and DirecTV.
I would never say any of these words out loud. I wouldn't. I mean, I think it, but it's an artistic expression.
Good to know.
Even though DirecTV now says they're $10 a month, it's not. You can't get it without their wireless plan, so it's 10 times more than they say. And there's no NFL network, and there's still
I just can't have this on the wall.
No,
obviously.
Of course not.
It's artistically, though, it's very good.
Sure.
Misleading offers are evil.
I love that sweater.
Spectrum doesn't have them. DirecTV bad. Spectrum good.
Gosh, Burger Chef, it's Wolfburger the werewolf! Where can I get delicious burgers? Where can I get fun food? Where, oh where?
At Burger Chef!
Where?
And now at participating Burger Chefs, you can buy fun meals that now come on Halloween magic meal trays. There's a magic trick in each fun meal. There are 10 different magic meal tricks you can collect.
Burger Chef, you're incredible!
Please, I'm on my way to Grandma's. Wow. Well, how about some low-fat cottage cheese? Maybe a Diet Cola? Well, I was saving this for myself, but... Mama warned me about wolves.
Thank you so much for coming. I didn't know who else to call.
We can handle just about anything.
You guys use responsible treatments, right? Everything's okay for pets and animals?
We're Green Pro certified.
Great. Well, we thought it might just go away on its own, but...
At Clark, we can handle just about anything, including pests, termites, rodents, spiders, bedbugs, yard and garden, and much, much more. Just not werewolves.
You know, some of those werewolf concepts and makeup are actually done better than a lot of 21st century werewolf special effects. In fact, the creation and the realization of a good werewolf seems to be one of the most difficult feats to accomplish in modern horror, even though we have so much more at our disposal than we used to. Almost every werewolf movie that you see stumbles on this one point. I mean, to tell you the truth, I could forgive some bad acting and poor storyline if they just give me a cool, scary as hell looking werewolf. And on the other hand, if you could tell me a kick-ass story with some good acting, I'll forgive your crappy werewolf. But come on, guys, let's do one or the other, huh? Maybe it's because filmmaking today seems less of an art form than it used to be. I mean, it seems more often than not putting a movie together is more of a cash grab than it is a labor of love. And a lot of times, even an attempt to tell a story in any coherent way. Which brings us to a new offering from author and artist Thom Brannan. If you watch the show with any regularity, you have heard Tom's name mentioned more than a few times, whether as a contributor to our Legends of the Werewolf Hunter anthologies, or as the creator of a new commissioned autobiography of a werewolf soundtrack. Tom has finished several tracks in this project, every one of them with a little piece of his heart and soul. And so we had a little trouble deciding on which one to feature for this special Halloween episode. Ultimately, we decided to use a track called Fang City, which was written to coincide with the events in Harwintown, Nevada, in the very first book. Let me set it up for you. The werewolf hunter, Sylvester James, is hunting a particular werewolf who has led him into a small desert town in Nevada called Harwintown, where he not only finds the wolf in question, the one he's hunting, but a whole town full of werewolves. Set to the 1897 French short film The Haunted Castle, here now for the first time is Thom Brannan's Zartanbar and the world premiere of Fang City.
Welcome to Fang City.
Comes to town this night, there's murder in the air. He's in his rage looking for a fight with whosoever will dare. Mother Moon shines on us all but holds no hope or pity. Show this fool who wants a brawl how things go in Fang City. Broken jaw, bloodlust and tension underneath as we only know one law. Come one, come all, and test your strength on our welcoming committee, and find yourself stretched full length on the dirty streets of Fang City.
And we'll have more tracks from Thom to share with you as time goes on. And I want to take the opportunity right now to thank Thom for his talent and devotion to his craft. These days, that's a commodity harder and harder to find, harder than maybe you might think. And we're proud to showcase it here. So thank you, Thom. Well, last month, after Doc Talks Shop, which is, as you know, our occult primer series here at the Werewolf Bar, we briefly discussed the idea of thought forms and or the Tibetan tulpas, which are in an oversimplified nutshell idea, thoughts or imaginings that can be brought to life in one form or another. Now you might be saying to yourself, what do thought forms have to do with your books or werewolf hunting for that matter? Well, as much as I'd like to tell you, all I can say is that the topic is relevant to the series in an intentionally ambiguous way. But be that as it may, here's Dr. T. Broussard with Doc Talks Shop. The Doctor is in.
Hello and welcome to Doc Talk Shop as part of Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter. Tonight, we'll be going over a topic that is of particular interest to me and my work, and that is thought forms or tulpas. Now, because most of this topic is usually spoken of in either Sanskrit or Tibetan terms. I have to acknowledge I don't speak either of those languages well. I give a list of the terminology below, and if you want to look up those terms to further elucidate what I'm talking about, feel free. Now, a thought form essentially is thought given shape through focus, intention, and investment of energy, usually by will or by activity over time. For example, the idea of mascots like Uncle Sam in America, that could be seen as a thought form. There are also examples in theosophy and seance culture in which people invent dead people that don't exist, and when they focus on them enough, they get a response through a seance as though the ghost was real. Now, does this mean the medium, or whatever you want to call it, is faking? No. It shows the creative power of the imagination to affect things around it to the point where an idea given form can take on its own reality. One of the key parts in making a thought form or tulpa is that eventually the entity that's created breaks free of its creator. It becomes a thing in and of itself. You often find this in houses and things where locations develop personality, genus loci, they call it in Latin. The idea of an object or a place developing its own spirit is often found in also things like cars or a cherished object, because people invest those things with traits, and then those traits become active. Now, given the way the world is today, this is where we get the idea of memes and cultural memes and social memes and viral this and viral that. These are all examples of creating thought forms, and people even talk about them taking on lives of their own in the strange world of the internet. And that's because to a degree they do. And this is where in some cultures you'll find accounts of magicians and so forth actually creating entities. They will bring an entity into being by making their group believe in it, and that belief gives power, and that power animates said belief as an external reality, and that reality in turn feeds back into the belief. And the person in charge of whatever that construct is in control of the construct to a point. You see this a lot in cult activities where people start out as con men but end up believing their own propaganda. And so you have all the tragedies that come of that. Now, don't get me wrong. Using thought forms, creating thought forms is not a negative thing. In fact, there are practices in which one can build up an ideal vision of oneself and work toward bringing that vision of self into reality, and thus creating an immortal version of myself. In fact, in the practice, it's referred to as the cultivation of the immortal fetus. And it is a process by which it is believed by some that one is able to obtain immortality in the flesh, in life, by changing their consciousness and the way they process energy. Now, this is a part of some martial art traditions as well. I have known people at a very advanced age who use these techniques and they remain vital even though they're in their 80s and so forth. They're still jumping up and kicking, and they're more physically active than people half their age because of these practices in theory. Now, what I've discussed so far mostly is from the perspective of the East, the Orient. In the West, you see a lot of thought form work in things like, as I mentioned earlier, seances. You also see them in urban myths, the guy at the hook at Lover's Lane, or the Jersey Devil, or Amityville. These things start out as stories connected to places and people, and they take on lives of their own. So much so that you can see influences of popular media on modern spiritual movements. For example, there are some Christian groups that think that movies like The Omen are an accurate description of what their Antichrist would be like, even though those accounts are purely fictional. The idea of them, the thought form of them, has become an influence on those Christian groups, and I'm not naming them. Point is, what people take in affects what comes out of those people. Which is, for example, why you shouldn't gossip, because when you participate in that, you're building up the thought form of that. And what people don't realize is that it will eventually come back on them. So, he who gossips is eventually gossiped about. And while some of my more erudite friends will not appreciate the comparison, that too is thought form work, because people stop interacting with the real people and they start interacting only with their idea of the people that they're gossiping about. And therefore, no actual communication takes place. In a more tangible example, many children develop imaginary friends, and those imaginary friends essentially are thought forms. They are tulpas. They are connected often to objects like teddy bears and stuffed animals, and they possess qualities that the child wants to have, or in some cases wishes a parent had. For example, a child who is protected by their teddy bear will give that teddy bear the qualities of being ferocious toward its perceived threats, because the child is not feeling protected by his parents. So the bear becomes a kind of talisman of protection that way, and it has a thought form of the bear itself connected to it. Now, in Western magic, you'll often hear of invocation and evocation. Invocation is a calling of an entity into a medium or into a magical triangle for conversation. Evocation is bringing an avatar of an entity out of oneself, usually, And in a sense, that evoked being is a being created by the magician. It's a Xerox copy, if you will, and that's why when you were dealing with evocation specifically, a number of magicians could all call on the same entity and they would all get a response. Now, invocation, in which an entity is brought into something, triangle, medium, what have you, you're not creating anything. You are taking something in. So there's a big difference. One is a thought form, a creation. The other is interacting with something that exists beyond oneself. One of the dangers of thought forms is that once they are independent of their creator, they can run amok. And so the masters teach that if you are knowingly creating a thought form, part of that process is putting limits on that thought form, including a time limit in which it will do its job and then unravel itself and thus cease to exist. So, all that being said, I hope this small message finds you well and that you find this useful. And as always, mind the moon.
Thank you, Doc. So the creative power of the human imagination at work, be it deliberately, as in the case of a magician, as Doc said, or inadvertently via zeitgeist. Now, of course, no one is suggesting that imaginary friends necessarily come to life or that they are something to be afraid of, any more than we're suggesting a person might evoke a better version of themselves independently through casual thought or sporadic concentration. Which isn't to say that these things don't happen accidentally or can't happen accidentally, as through collective fear of or belief in some idea. In fact, in my mind, if there ever was an idea that deserved to become real in this way, it's Santa Claus, whose merchandise should start showing up just any day now. But Halloween comes first, and to make the most of it, I want to replay for you Reverend Matthew Baugh's original presentation of Discovering Halloween, which we first aired on Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter back in October of 2022. Now, it's easy to say that what we call Halloween today is the remnant of the Celtic fire festival Samhain, and I think most of us are aware of that. But there's more to it, a lot more as it turns out. Our modern take on Halloween, especially in the United States and Canada, can hardly be defined in one giant leap from Druidism to 2024. And many will be surprised to find out some of its Roman aspects, to say nothing of the last 100 years of alterations made by media and popular culture. This is why Matthew's presentation is worth repeating for the third year in a row, as it covers all these bases. Listen now as my editor, Matthew Baugh, presents Discovering Halloween.
Hello. Brian asked me to talk a little about what Halloween is and where it comes from. What it is fairly simple. If you live in North America, you've likely experienced it. There are the decorations, the sales, the movie marathons, the trick-or-treating, the parties, and the thrill and the experience of dressing up as someone else, the delicious, spooky feeling of the season. It is many people's favorite holiday. But where does it come from? Where do all the ghosts and cobwebs and werewolves and other things that go bump in the night, where do they fit into this beloved holiday? Well, the answer is fairly complicated because there are a lot of things, a lot of elements that go into Halloween, and they come from a number of places. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to try to work my way through one at a time, and then you can judge for yourself where Halloween comes from. First, let's take the name. That one is fairly straightforward. Halloween, the word, has a distinctly Christian origin. Halloween is from the Middle English, and it's a contraction of All Hallows Even, or All Hallows E'en, and it translates into modern English as the eve of All Hallows Day or All Saints Day, which is a Christian celebration that goes back until back as far as the 400s AD. As for the date of October 31st, that one's a little trickier. It kind of comes from a very old Celtic festival that is known in Ireland and Scotland as Samhain. If that name isn't familiar to you, it's probably because, like me, you've seen it written and not seen it, not heard it said. And I've, for years and years and years, thought it was Samhain. In fact, the real Ghostbusters cartoon told me it was Samhain, and I thought they were an unimpeachable source. So, wisdom came late in life to me. Well, Samhain is a festival. It's one of 4 Celtic festivals that occur annually, and it was the one that represented the beginning of the season of winter. And it came around November 1st, but one thing to realize is that the ancient Celtic peoples didn't use the Julian calendar. They didn't use the calendar that we have, which is a solar calendar. They used a lunar calendar, and the cycles of the lunar calendar and the solar calendar don't line up terribly well. And so holidays that come off the lunar calendar, they tend to bounce around a lot. So according to our calendar, Samhain could have been anywhere from mid-October to mid-November, but it was around November 1st. And when the Julian calendar was finally accepted in Ireland and Scotland, and I was not able to find when exactly that was, but they standardized Samhain to November 1st. Now that's a likely explanation, because the Christian tradition of All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, they had not been fixed to a single date for a long period of time. The All Saints' Day, when it started out, and it started fairly early, it started in the 3rd or 4th century AD, it was a day to remember all those people who in the previous year had died for the sake of their faith, in other words, the martyrs. All Saints' Day was celebrated in some places the Sunday after Easter, in some places the Sunday after Pentecost, and it was mostly a spring or summer day of prayer and devotion to those who had died. All Souls' Day, similarly, was sometime in the Easter season. It wasn't for some time until those became standardized. And they became standardized, and this really kind of took effect mostly in the Mediterranean areas, the parts that had been very much the old Roman Empire. And this came about in 609 or 610, when Pope Boniface IV said that All Saints' Day was May 13th, which is not, we don't know exactly why. The presenting argument is that was to celebrate the commemoration of an old Roman pagan temple. It was reconsecrated as a Christian church. There's some speculation that it might have been to coincide with a Roman pagan festival called Lemuria, which is the day that the head of the household has to appease the spirits of the dead, or else they'll be around the house creating mischief for the next year. And so he has to get up early and put on his clothing backwards and march backwards through the house chanting and throwing beans over his shoulder. The idea is that the ghosts, which were called lemurs or larvae, will eat the beans and be satisfied and go back down to the underworld. Or if they're not satisfied, then the whole household can get up and rattle pots and pans and make as much noise as possible. See, ghosts like beans, but they hate noise. It wasn't until sometime later, and we don't know again exactly the reasons. There are a couple of reasons given in Christian records that have to do with the dedication of a church or a special conference that was held. But Pope Gregory III, in either 731 or 741, you can see how shaky the records are there, declared that All Saints' Day would be November 1st. And at that point, it seems to have synced up with Samhain. Whether that was to try to get rid of the vestiges of pagan religion in Ireland and Scotland is a matter of scholarly debate. James Fraser, who wrote The Golden Bough, thought it definitely was. Several others who've come along since have argued that no, it was not. That and when you look at the calendar, Ireland had become Christian in the early 5th century, and so Samhain had basically been around in the British Isles under Christianity for 300 years before this happened. It seems like they would have tried, if they'd been very concerned about repressing it, they might have tried sooner. So it might be, it might not be. It's a shame we don't have the evidence to say for certain, but at this distance, all we can really do is speculate. Now, one of the first things you think of when you think of Halloween are ghosts. And the spirits of the dead are there in everything that came before. They're there in the Roman festival of Lemuria. They're there in the Christian All Saints' Day. They're there in the Christian All Souls' Day. And it looks like they're there in Samhain. There are two epic poems that come from Ireland in the 7th century. One is called the Tain Boculain, which was the Coolies' cattle raid, and the other are the Boyhood Deeds of Finn. And in both of them, Samhain is mentioned, and Samhain is mentioned at a time when the fairy mounds. There are these large earthen mounds. They're very, very old burial mounds that you find, especially in Ireland, and they're associated with both the land of the dead and the land of the fairies. And there are certain times of day and there are certain times of year, and Samhain seems to be one of these, when the barriers between the world of the living and the world of the dead grow very thin, and the dead can come out and mingle with the living. So the idea of ghosts being connected to Samhain and that passing on somehow to Halloween seems to be a very logical assumption. So what was ancient Samhain like? Well, it was a day when you would end the day with a grand feast. Before that, there was often harvesting in the fields to be done. Now, there is an Irish figure called the Cailleach, which I'm probably not pronouncing quite right, but she was an old woman, and she probably at one point had been a weather goddess. she was believed at this time of year to turn into a hare. And the farmers, as they were harvesting their fields, and when they came to the end of one field, they'd raise a great shout to try to drive the hare off into the next field. Because if you got the calich to go from field to field, you would have a good harvest. We don't know much more about the celebration than this. We do, as I said, have the record of the idea of ghosts appearing at Samhain. And there's some thought that maybe the ghosts of dear departed ones would come and join you at the feast as your guests, while the ghosts of those who had been murdered might be lurking around that evening for a chance at revenge. In any case, ghosts are something that go far, far back in both the, or at least spirits of the dead are something that go far, far back in both the Celtic and the Christian tradition. What about skeletons? Well, skeletons show up more on the Christian side than the Celtic. Skeletons, as a part of the remembrance of the dead, go back to a tradition called memento mori. It's not clear whether this decision started among Jews and Christians or started among Greek and Roman philosophers, but it's certainly something that permeated late Roman and early European society. And the idea was you would take something, a skeleton or a skull, and you would say to another person, memento mori, which means remember that you are mortal. This took a much more specific form in the 14th century. That's the year when we got the Black Plague, killing off just about a third of the population of Europe. And so death became a terrible, omnipresent reality in a way that modern people have not experienced it. And one of the ways they coped is they saw kind of a positive side to this, and you would see pictures drawn that are called the Danse Macabre, or the Dance of the Dead. And in these pictures, you'll have rings of people dancing hand in hand. Some of the people will be living, and some of the people will be skeletons. All of the people, real and skeletons, will be dressed in various costumes. They'll look like soldiers, they'll look like nobles, they'll look like peasants, they'll look like knights, they'll look like clergy. And the message of the Danse Macabre is very simple. Death is the great equalizer. When it comes to death, all people, no matter what their status, no matter what their education, no matter what their wealth, no matter what their power in this world, are all reduced to complete equality. This is something that that you can see very strongly in the skeleton decorations, and it takes on an even more special form in Mexico. In Mexico and in other places where Mexicans have immigrated, we have Los Dias de los Muertos, the Days of the Dead. Those cover Halloween, they cover All Saints' Day, they cover All Souls' Day, and the costumes, which focus on skeletons, and the candy, which is little sugar cubes which have been shaped into skulls, are just amazing to look at. Dia de los Muertos is, it's different. Halloween tends to have kind of a spooky tone or a somber tone. Dias de los Muertos is pure celebration and fun. There's been recently some discussion that Dias de los Muertos might owe as much or more to the indigenous religions of Mexico, from the Aztecs and the Mayas, than it does to Christianity. But unfortunately, I haven't been able to find any documentation on that. One of the problems with trying to look at old Mexican traditions is we don't have any written records until we get the conquistadores and the priests who, and it wasn't always in their, in what they assumed were their interests to record things accurately. So that the possible indigenous origins of Dia de los Muertos, we'll have to look forward to the developing scholarship on that. So we've dealt with ghosts and skeletons, and that leaves us with a number of other creatures of the night. There's the bat, and bats have often been seen as kind of unnatural because they fly like birds, but they have no feathers, and they only come out at night, and they're just kind of weird as far as the average person who goes looking at them says. And there's one other thing. There's a legend of evil spirits who drink blood. This goes back in Europe to classical Greek times. Sturgis and Lemures and Vardalax, or to use the most common word, vampires. In the 1600s, Spanish and Portuguese explorers in the New World discovered a kind of bat that instead of eating fruit or meat, well, actually it did eat fruit, they just didn't realize that, but it subsisted largely off of drinking the blood of animals. And if you read some of the accounts of the conquistadors, you would guess that cattle and sheep and llamas and other livestock were drained of their blood and left for dead by tiny creatures about that big. Actually, vampires make a very nice, distinct cut with their very sharp teeth, and they lap up the little bit of blood that flows and leave the animal pretty much unharmed and maybe even unaware that it's been fed on. But the discovery of a blood-drinking animal captured their imaginations and became linked to these legends. I think the first time it is explicitly linked, and the first time vampires become popular enough that people start dressing at them as Halloween, has to do with the publication of a 19th century novel by Bram Stoker called Dracula. Similarly, while the werewolf myth has also been around to classical Greek times, werewolves weren't a terribly popular monster. Not until 1941, when Universal Studios released a movie called The Wolfman with Lon Chaney Jr., which really made the werewolf a popular and entertaining monster in a popular costume as well. Trick or treat is one of those that it's hard to figure out when that started. There is a tradition, an old tradition, although we don't know how old because we can only trace it back to about the 1600s in Scotland and Ireland. It's called guising or souling, and the idea is that you put on a costume, and the old costumes were very simple. You basically made yourself look like a human scarecrow, and you would go from house to house. Children would often perform. They would recite memorized poems or memorized verses of scripture in return for candy or something called a soul cake, which was baked in Christian households and given out, or possibly even money. At some point, the tradition came that if people didn't give you your treat, you gave them a trick. This came over with waves of migrants to the Americas, and the trick part in this country, in Canada and in the United States, became very popular. And there were lots of things like porch doors and gates and wagon wheels that were stolen, removed from the homes and left on Main Street by pranksters. So the treat part is fairly modern, and the trick part is also responsible for the creation of haunted houses. Haunted houses began in the Great Depression as a way to keep trick-or-treaters off the streets. It was supposed to be a safe, fun, family-friendly way of celebrating. And so you had, very much as you have today, houses with elaborate decorations, actors in costumes, and you get a good, nice, thrilling scare as you go through them. They started simply. They still exist. These days, there are haunted hospitals, haunted prisons, all kinds of variety and often Hollywood quality makeup and special effects. This inspired what I consider to be the strangest and in some ways most disturbing Halloween innovation of all, which was the Hell House in the 1970s, inspired by Jack Chick books. Jack Chick was a cartoonist who wrote a number of Christian comic books, one of which detailed all the sins of Halloween, which was the birthday of the devil, and was a time when pagan people would kidnap children to use them for human sacrifice and all sorts of other nonsense like that. Motivated by the threat of Halloween, some conservative churches across the country, across the United States and Canada, began hosting what they called hell houses. And the name kind of suggests what these were. They were an alternative to a haunted house where you would go in and you would see actors and you'd see sets decorated, and the sets would, there would be sort of a two-part tableau. The first part, you would go in and you would see young people who were obviously considering alcohol or drugs or premarital sex or an abortion or becoming homosexual or various other things like that. You'd move on to the next room and you get a picture of those same young people now suffering the torments of hell, where haunted houses were meant to give you a delicious thrill of fear. These were meant to give you a traumatic sort of fear that would hopefully frighten you into a more righteous way of living than the theoretically depraved sort of life that you might have been living beforehand. They're still around, I'm sorry to say. I hope there's some legitimate value to them that someone has found, but of course, in the latter part of the 20th century, costumes, decorations, animatronics have all taken on a life of their own as sophisticated commercial costumes and makeup have become available. And these days, you can, with a little money, you can make yourself up as anything from one of the Walking Dead to a werewolf, to a superhero, to a fairy princess, to so many other things. As I mentioned before, there's a kind of fun that comes, a kind of release that comes when you put together an identity that's not who you usually or really are. There's a kind of freedom that seems to come with that. So, what are the origins of Halloween? Well, there are some Christian elements. There are some pagan elements, especially Celtic elements, but also Roman and South European and Irish. There are also secular elements, especially commercial elements. So, what's the origin of Halloween? I'm not sure we can say it has one, but as we celebrate it with its many diverse origins, I hope all of you do so safely and have a lot of fun.
He does a great evil laugh, doesn't he? Special thanks to Matthew for recording that for us in the first place and for letting us have the use of it these last couple of years now. Well, there's only 2 months left in 2024, and man, it just does not seem possible. We'll have some more announcements and updates for you by the time we get together again. But until then, let me remind you once again to check out the linkage in the description down below and to like and subscribe the channel. That would be very much appreciated. And as always, feel free to visit us on the web at werewolfhunter.com or to drop me a line at email brian@werewolfhunter.com. We'd love to hear from you, and I'll look forward to seeing you all again in November. But in the meantime, happy Halloween, happy hunting, and mind the moon.
Don't turn around. There may be something behind you.